we love partnering with the AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin, and tonight's also partnered with OCA Wisconsin. And here to give you a few words is Lorna Young. Lorna, take it away. Only so much play.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'm always really pleased to be in the presence of the Boswell booksellers, and I thank Daniel and Chris for this time. I am with the AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin and also with OCA, which is Organization of Chinese Americans. And just a few words of who the AAPI Coalition is. We were formed in 2020 in response to the anti-Asian hate that was triggered by the COVID pandemic. And something that I'm just really proud to tell you about is that on April 4th, if you don't know already, about a month ago, Governor Tony Evers signed the Wisconsin's Hmong American and Asian American Education Bill into law. And this was landmark legislation known as Act 266, which mandates the inclusion of Hmong American and Asian American history, culture, and contributions in Wisconsin's K-12 public schools. This is a significant milestone across the state for Wisconsin after decades, literally 2.5 decades of advocacy with the legislature, where we now seek to uplift the visibility and understanding of our AAPI communities, especially our Hmong communities, which are the #1 Asian American community in Wisconsin, covering cities all the way from La Crosse to Sheboygan to Wausau to here in Madison. And Wisconsin is now the 6th state in the nation to pass a statewide education bill that includes Asian Americans. So, yeah. And so in light of this, we especially value our relationship with Boswell Books as featuring Asian American authors, such as Rachel, helps to elevate the understanding of our diverse Asian communities in here in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Always, again, a pleasure to partner with you and the organization. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to sit down. And welcome. First of all, let me tell you that today is day 5,522 that Boswell's been here and been in business. Thank you. And I am thrilled to spend it having a conversation with Rachel Khong. She is author of Goodbye Vitamin, which is winner of the California Book Award for First Fiction and an NPR, Vogue, and Esquire Best Book of the Year. And she's written for the New York Times Book Review, the Paris Review, Tin House, lots of other great places. Founder of The Ruby, a work and event space for women and non-binary writers and artists. And she's here tonight with her new novel, Real Americans. I've got a couple copies so you can see. It's gotten raves everywhere. It's a book club pick, New York Times bestseller. Congrats, by the way. Yeah. And it is a favorite here at Boswell. We have 5 different booksellers who've read this book and absolutely love it. Gao calls it magnificent. Daniel calls it expansive. Jenny calls it thought-provoking. Tim calls it vital. And because I'm sitting here, I get more than one word. I said it's a stunner of a book about fate, luck, country science with even a tick of magic. We absolutely love it. I think you will too. So please give her a warm welcome. A little switch on me.
Okay. Okay, it's on.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Chris, for hosting this. And thank you to Boswell. I mean, so many amazing quotes from these booksellers. And I'm so grateful because, yeah, booksellers, I couldn't do what I do without what you do. And people.
Sure you could.
Yes. No, I couldn't. I couldn't.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. So first things first, I always think it's nice if you can maybe give us, what's the elevator pitch? Just introduce us to the book.
I have to say I'm incredibly bad at the elevator pitch. That's why I wrote a book. And that's why the book is so long. The elevator pitch is that it's a story about 3 generations of a Chinese American family. And it asks a lot of questions. I think the main question is, how do we become who we become? And along the way, we meet different characters. We sort of jump a lot of years, travel to a lot of places. But yeah, that's the, if it's a short elevator ride, that's what I'll say.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all those things are true, having read it. another way to introduce the book for me, at least, and I always like to know this, just as a nosy writer person, but what was the spark? What was the first moment you were like, this is a book, this is, there's something here? What was that for you with this book?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, books for me, they happen when it becomes clear that what I'm interested in is too unwieldy for a short story, let's say. So I started writing this in December of 2016, actually right after the surprising election. And I thought that I was writing a short story, and I thought the short story was in the voice of Lily, who's one of the first characters we meet in this book. And I thought it was sort of, I don't know, just I thought it was just something fun. I thought it was about just this young woman living in New York, sort of aimless in her life.
Mhm.
And then quickly it became clear that I wasn't just writing this, sort of escapist story. I was actually writing something that involved a lot of the things that I was thinking about at the time. I think in the wake of that election, right? Things like, I don't know, topics like power and identity and belonging. What is an American? Like, what makes for an American? What has being American, having grown up American, what has that? I don't know, how has that shaped my life personally? And so all of these themes sort of began to emerge, and then I thought, oh no, this is much bigger than a story.
Totally.
It's just
Totally.
too much.
Yeah, there's so many big ideas in this book, and I really love that about it. But you say, it started with Lily, and I want to talk about her character a little bit first, maybe. Um, we were introduced to her. It's right on the cusp of Y2K, if we all remember that. She's very Gen X, and to me, I really love this character because she's kind of slackery in her way. She's very much like the anti-striver. Something I love about her is there's a point in the book where she's buying scratch-off lotto tickets, and I wrote it down. I have to find it, the set for life scratchers she's buying because she likes the idea of being set for life and not having to do anything. Were you kind of intentionally writing like an anti-striver with her?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that she's someone who is a little bit aimless. She's 22 years old, so I think a lot of us are
Yeah.
perhaps aimless at that age. Um, but she has this feeling that she should be doing something else with her life. I think that that's sort of this American indoctrination that she has, that she should make something of herself, that she should be productive with her life. And that's kind of not really her style. She does maybe care more about relationships than about ambition, but she feels this pressure, I think, to be someone she isn't. And that's something that I was really interested in with this book, is these stories that we're sort of steeped in constantly, stories about who we should be, and stories about what it means to be like a worthwhile member of society, right? And she's coming up against those stories, but sort of not finding her place in them exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some strange things going on in that opening too. I want to talk about one of the little moments at the very open. I'm not giving anything away here. It's the first page. Um, um, I mean, you kind of open and close the book thinking about one of the big ideas in the book is time too, and I think that's fascinating. And again, I'm not going to give you the ending. I'm not a monster. But in the opening scene, Lily's looking at her alarm clock, and she goes into this fugue state, or something's happening where time stops passing for her. And it's a little bit of magic. Can you tell us what's happening there, maybe?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been having to talk about this book without spoilers, and
Right.
there
Yeah.
are so many ways in which to spoil this book. And so I wonder just how much I should say about time, but I think that this book is really it's really concerned with time. As you said, Lily starts off with this sort of like time blip. She finds herself almost stuck in a moment, and she can't move out of it. And this happens to her a few times throughout the book. There are seats in front, by the way. I know it's scary, but it's not that scary. She's kind of stuck in this moment, and it happens to her, these blips, like throughout her narration, and then we're introduced to other characters in this novel, other members of her family, and they also experience these sort of blips in time. And you have to read the book to find out why they happen exactly. But I think the thing that I was interested in, especially with time, is just I think especially here in the US, there's so much this feeling of like time scarcity. Like I think I was raised with this sense that I didn't have enough time. I needed to make the most of my time. I needed to be productive with every moment of my time. I think that's an American sort of belief, but it's also maybe an immigrant belief. And that's where they sort of, I think they sort of meet there. And so I was really interested in just writing about like why that's such a common feeling, to feel that there's not enough time, to feel like yeah, that time is something to be used wisely, right? Or something
Right.
to be sort of like, we talk about time in terms of currency and
Yeah.
sort of in this like capitalist way, like we spend time or we save time or whatever, right? It's almost talked about like money, and time is money, right? That's the phrase. But I guess I don't know, I started feeling like that wasn't necessarily how I wanted to view time anymore. Like I sort of, think that there's, I suspect there's another way of being that's like less sort of, yeah, less, I think, worried about time running out. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I was talking to my shrink this morning about the same thing. Sorry, it's a little, anyway, Lily's not the only person in the book, and let's maybe just, kick my brain back in. Throughout the book, we see 3 generations in this family. And I'm really curious how you decided, like, because this is very different and bigger, just time-wise, people-wise in your first novel. So how did you decide, like, or how did you break into, like, oh, this is going to be a big generational thing. I'm going to bring all these people into it. How did that happen for you writing this?
Yeah, it happened. I don't know, just like really organically. I sort of had Lily's voice at the very beginning. And then after I had written a bunch of pages from her perspective, Nick, her son's voice came to me. And that was, so Lily starts out in 1999, she's 22 years old. And then we sort of jump ahead in the second section to follow Nick, who's her son living in 2021, sort of in the pandemic years. And we sort of jump ahead after that in the third section to 2030, and we follow Lily's mother, May. But each of these voices really came to me pretty distinctly. Like I just knew that these characters had to be in the book. And I think part of the reason that they're in the book is that they sort of, I don't know, they inform one another, like each of the voices sort of sheds light on other characters, but also on the characters themselves, right? Like we might see one character from another character's perspective and think that we know everything about them. But then it turns out when we're actually in their perspective that we didn't know the full story. And I think that's sort of the I don't know, the project of this book a little bit is to sort of show that like we just don't know everything. I mean, in all spheres, right? Like we don't know everything about other people. We don't know everything about ourselves even. And we definitely don't know enough often to decide what's right for another person, even another person that you love deeply,
Yeah, that's something I love particularly about Nick's section too, is how, we've jumped 20 years, more than 20 years into the future. And so then we are seeing Lily from outside of herself suddenly, and how you deal with that is really cool. Speaking of control, and this is one of those we'll talk about without giving too much away, but I do want to talk about the science in the book. And so again, there's genetic dabbling going on, I guess is how I'll put it, right? Throughout the book. Maybe tell us what's going on there. How'd you get interested? How did this come into the book for you?
Yeah, I don't want to say there's too much science in there and spook people.
Yeah, no,
because
it's not sci-fi.
it's not sci-fi. I think it would, if you came to it wanting sci-fi, you might be disappointed, but there's definitely science in it. there's a couple characters who are geneticists, and I don't know. I just knew from the beginning that this was a book that had these scientist characters in it. And actually, a very early sort of research for this book was, I was really interested in just eugenics and like that movement in the early 1900s. And mostly the fact that everyone just thought it was a good idea, to try to build a better human being. And a lot of wealthy families especially funded that research. Like the Carnegies spent a lot of money on it. And it was just really widely accepted to be a good thing to do,
Right.
which of course in retrospect seems really nuts. So I was thinking about that, and I was doing a lot of research into that because I was really interested in just like the idea of it happening again, right? Like this sort of believing that but powerful people believing that they know best what's for the best for humanity, basically. And I was seeing just sort of echoes of that in, I mean, so many industries now, right? Like the tech industry. I mean, definitely genetics, and I think just the future of humanity is sort of on the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of that research didn't really make it into the book. This is not a book about eugenics at all. It's a book about sort of what might happen in the near future, but also what we've already sort of done in the past. And it's about, like what, I don't know, what we sort of value about being human beings, I think. And I don't think it's not too technical. Let's just say that, because I'm definitely not a scientist myself, and I did a lot of research, a lot of reading, also a lot of talking to scientists and people who are much smarter than me in order to get the details of this book right. But definitely the goal was to make it really approachable, and it's not a book where you have to know truly anything about science.
And my follow-up question here too is that I think it's interesting, but what's super fascinating is, of course, what you're doing with this and how you're really using this this one, can we erase disease? Can we do X, Y, Z in the next generation, right? To explore these huge ethical questions that you've brought up, and it's from 100 years ago, we're still having these conversations in so many different fields. But I think the heart of the book is really these weighty ethical questions, like what does this generation or any generation owe the next generation? And it's a family book too, and you're dealing with that. But I think it goes two ways, because it's like in terms of shelter, protection, care, what do we owe as far as seeing them forward? But at the same time, in terms of freedom, like what do we owe in terms of the base level of letting this child be their own person and everything like that? And those lines of protection and control, I think, are fascinating in the book. And how are you grappling with that as you're writing that? Because those big questions to me are really the heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, they are at the heart of it, and I don't think that I wrote my way into an answer necessarily. Like those big
Right.
questions are just part of the project of the book, and they're questions that I think the intent was sort of just to like pose them and to ask, what do we owe the next generation? What do we owe our loved ones, the people in our family? And I think especially with the knowledge that we don't know everything about our loved one, we don't know everything about the next generation. Like we're just, because of who we are, because of how we've been shaped in our particular contexts, there's just a lot that we don't understand about, like whatever other person or group of people we might be trying to make a decision for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will make you answer the one question within there, though, which is like, if there's one thing you would be like, stop doing that. What is that? What's the one thing you're like?
Oh, you mean
don't,
like in
science, in anything book outside of regarding those questions, I suppose?
Well, I guess I don't know, maybe I question the need for any billionaires to exist.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
Because I think, with that much, money and power, those
Mhm.
people get to decide a lot for other people. And I don't know that that's good for anybody,
Yeah.
including the billionaires. I don't know.
Maybe not such a great idea.
Yeah.
That's down here on this. Actually,
Yeah.
Matthew, the character, our one of our billionaires. We meet him at the beginning of the book. Lily meets him at the beginning of the book, and he's kind of weaved throughout the story. It's not heir to a pharmaceutical conglomerate, I think is a generous way of putting his title. And he brings up these interesting questions. Do you think it's possible? And that's what I'm good. Do you think it's possible for a billionaire to be an ethical person? I mean, I think you're playing with that in the book, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't know. What I was thinking about was not even necessarily billionaires, but just privileged people in general. And, I count myself a very privileged person. Like I think that with privilege comes a lot of, I don't know, just like casual harm to other people, right? Like the fact that we can just order things on Amazon
right.
and have them conveniently delivered to us. I think it was really made clear during the pandemic, right? That people who had more could sort of like fortify themselves and be protected from harm by putting other people in harm's way. And so I think if that's true for me as a person, like multiply that by 1 billion, and then I don't know, can you be a good person? I don't know. I think you have a lot more, there's just a lot more that you're responsible for offsetting, I think.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there's that question, right? Like, is whatever you're putting your funds toward actually good for the people that it's, that it's purporting to help? I don't actually know.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone does,
I
write
know.
to us later.
But I also
Um,
think, I think part of this book too is that if anyone does have the answer, um, I don't know if I believe you.
Yeah.
Because like I
Yeah.
think that the certainty is sort of what afflicts this billionaire class, for example. And I think I'm just very skeptical of that certainty, especially when it comes to how we should do things, what's right for lots of people. Yeah, I just question that.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I think one other interesting thing you do illustrate with that character, with Matthew, though, is, and he's very quick to use this as a defense, but I think all of your characters are very much dealing with just the luck of their birth and everything. And he uses that very much to be like, well, I was just, I can't help it. But yeah, I think so much of the circumstance of any individual's life is just up to that random luck of birth. And how are we playing with that idea in the novel?
Yeah, well, it's the luck, but it's also what we choose, right? And how we sort of
Right.
fashion our lives based on the things that we've been, given or not given. And I think that's just such an interesting question to me. And I think that's where the heart of the book is. I think that for me, I've always felt, I don't know, I've always had this very active imagination as someone who is an immigrant to this country. And my family came when I was 2 years old. And I think since then, I've always sort of wondered, like, what would my life have been like if I didn't leave Malaysia, which is where my family's from? Would I be a writer? Would my life be completely different? I know I would have a different accent. What languages would I speak? I don't know. Like I just feel like my life would be pretty different. And it almost feels like, yeah, I think just that sort of question of who would I be feels like it's so dependent on these kind of random things. Like I didn't choose to come here. My parents chose that, but that actually informed my life a lot and maybe led to me becoming a writer. I don't know. Maybe I would have still been a writer. I have no idea. But I think it's just this combination of factors, right? It's like the things that are just randomly you, but also these decisions that you actually make. And I think that in America especially, there is this belief that we're responsible for more than we actually are, right? Like even for a character like Matthew, who is born into wealth, he gets a lot of credit for things that he has done and what he has made of himself. I think that we readily believe that people with wealth earned it,
Yeah.
right? And it's like their own doing. And we also readily believe that if you don't, if you're struggling, if you don't have a home, that it's also your fault. And I just don't, I think that that's something to poke at a little bit, because I don't necessarily believe that's true, right? I think it's often, it's often randomness, it's often luck, it's often like systemic issues that keep people where they are. And yet it's just one of these American myths that we have, like that we're so responsible for our whole lives. And I think that's true to a degree. And like, it's really good to believe that you can change things and that you are responsible for your own life, because I think if you didn't believe that, you would just roll over and never, like you would just like
Sure.
stay in bed all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that there's some kind of balance in between that, right? Yeah, I think that's where I fall, is like it's like who we are is both luck and it's what we make of everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Speaking of American myths, the book is Real Americans, right? So first, just where did you find the title?
Yeah. So for a long time, this book was called New Thing, December 2016. And it was called that for years and years. Beyond what I wanted. And I would, from 2021, look at the title and think, oh no, I've been working on this thing for so long. And at one point, a character in Lily's section of the book, so Lily is, a Chinese American who grows up fully in America. She goes to China and she meets a Chinese man there who just remarks that she is a real American, because to him,
Right.
she's a real American, even though in America, she hasn't necessarily felt fully like she belonged. She always sort of felt othered by people. And so she sort of receives that comment from somebody else. And I think the moment that he spoke that comment, or the moment that I wrote it down, I thought, oh, this is the title. Like this is what each of the characters is sort of struggling with. And it makes so much sense as the title. But I also felt like immediately repelled by it. Like it was too big of a title. I mean, first of all, the word Americans, I think is, obviously so it's so much to put into a title. The word real and Americans is sort of deliberately provocative. And I think I really, I felt a lot of just trepidation, having this title, like wondering, could I actually write a book that, that felt, commensurate with this title. And and I resisted it for a long time, but here we are.
I mean, I think mission accomplished,
Yeah.
first of all.
Thank you.
Totally. But I read in another interview too that you said that it sounds like at a point you were afraid it sounds like something Donald Trump would say too.
I mean, it is something he has said.
Right.
And I think that's like a part of the reason that it is this title, right? That there are people who believe that it's a fine thing to sort of categorize people as real Americans versus not. I think like implicit in the title is the fact that it's sort of a trick question. I think like again with the other questions, it's like if you have an answer to who a real American is, I don't believe you.
Yeah. Do you really?
Yeah. Do you really? Because I think the sort of premise of America itself is, I mean, America was taken from Native people, and America itself is this sort of shaky idea that was like, all of these ideas put together. And so I think the fact that, someone like Trump is declaring what
Right.
a real American is. Yeah, I don't believe him.
I know, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it's part of the fabulous provocation of this title too.
Mhm.
Why did I pronounce that like that?
I mean, it's very European, I think.
We're just gonna let's move on. So I have a nerdy technical writing question about the title too, because the
Yeah.
title shows up, the phrase shows up so organically in each section of the
Yeah.
book. And for me, like, you see that happen, like where you're like, there's the title, and it can be really, really corny. However, every time it happened in this book, I just jaw dropped. I was like, on a technical level, just as a writer, I'm like, that is so organic. This is smooth. This is natural. You're layering meaning with it. It is, and it's a really bold writer move to drop your title in 3 different times in the book. So like, did that happen later in edits? When did that happen? Was it, yeah, how'd you do it? That's my question.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think that question, how did I do it, is so I could make something up, but I don't think it would be true. I think it really was just about like feeling my way into it. And the fact that this
Sure.
phrase, obviously like you hear the phrase and then your mind goes into a lot of different directions, right? I'm sure
Mhm.
for each person here, like they're thinking something different, like slightly different. So it was really easy for me, I think, to to just want to sort of address all the levels at which this phrase is working, right? And so, I mentioned Lily is viewed as a real American by someone in China, but in a different section, real American refers to something more like what Donald Trump is saying, right? Like,
Mhm.
and just the fact that the phrase has so many layers and meanings, I think that helped with that sort
Sure.
of organic placement. But it also just took a long, this book took a long time to write, and so it was a lot of. I always think like easy reading is hard writing. And so that was sort of my goal with this. Like I really wanted to write a book that like reproduced some of the feelings of reading that I have had in my life, that feeling of just like being really immersed in a book and having it like take you away from the world for a little while. Also the feeling of wanting to race through a book, but also telling yourself to slow down. Like I really wanted to sort of create that feeling for the reader because that's an experience that I really enjoy when I'm reading. And so I was thinking about that, but making, I think the actual writing of it, it's not like I just like started the first word and ended with the last word, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of years of figuring out everything that happened in between. And so I think when it comes to like things that feel organic or whatever, they were pretty labored over. But I think that the goal was ease. The goal was this feeling of like seamlessness.
I mean, I know I'm not the only writer in the room. It's always nice to hear it was belabored over. Actually, yeah, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Speaking of real Americans, I mean, I have my answer. Is there a character you think of as the most quote unquote real American among your characters? In a way, I mean, ironically, however you
Yes.
think about that.
That's a great question. I think I don't know. Interesting. I want to hear your answer actually.
But we want yours first.
Okay, mine first honestly is I think it's May, who is the character at the very end that we hear from. She's Lily's mother. She's the one who made the decision to come to the US, and she is
Before
someone,
you say that,
yeah, that's what you thought.
May's the same for me. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I just don't want to
I
seem
love
like I
that.
was just tagging.
No,
on.
no.
Sorry, go ahead.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think that she is someone who really buys into a lot of American ideals, and she is an ambitious person. She's someone who wants to sort of forget her past and forge a new path in this new country. And and when I think like, what does that word American mean to me? I mean, there's so many meanings, right? Like, and many of them are explored in this book. When I think of just like, yeah, the adjectives that come to mind, I think of May and I think of her aspiration. You know, we talked about Lily earlier and her sort of lack of ambition. Like, she doesn't quite fit into that American dream
Yeah.
story, you know, and May very much seeks it out. She wants it, and she really believes in it. And I think it also disappoints her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another American experience.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, something I love about May too is she's such a perfect representation of the irony of the American myths and everything, because, you know, she's exactly, she is, give me your poor, you're tired, you're hungry, she's escaping the Cultural Revolution. I don't think I'm giving too much away to say that at the time. She's coming here for refuge and looking for a new life and everything. And yes, everything that happens to her is, again, that flip of this myth of what America's supposed to be, what we're supposed to take in, and the actual experience. It's just beautifully juxtaposed. I have a question to tackle. I'm so glad you said May, because now I can use my other booksellers question. We have a couple of booksellers here. Like I said, a few who loved it. So I got questions from them too. This is from Tim, actually. He's as you'll see, one of our deeper thinkers here. But he's thinking particularly about May and that Chinese immigrants to America of her generation, whose lives have had two giant upheavals, because first in China during the Cultural Revolution, they're fleeing from their country that felt, that was home, but because of the drastic changes and, often threats to their lives, they've lost that context for being. And then they come to America and they're making a new life in a second completely new culture. So twice, they're losing the context of their lives. Tim was said to me, like, ask her, how do they carry on? How, do they abandon their past? Do they try and rebuild some sense of self, community? Essentially just how do the immigrants of those generations carry any culture forward? Do they want to?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I can speak to like the whole group of people. But I think for May specifically, she just has this sort of resilience, and I think the way she does do it is by wanting to totally forget her past and start anew. And that's, like we were talking about before, this very American belief that you can just, leave all the past behind and the future matters. The present doesn't matter. I mean, like it's,
Right.
I feel like
Yeah.
America is such a future oriented place. Like we don't like
Yeah.
reckon with our past really. And so May sort of embodies that and doesn't reckon with her past until she kind of has to, she has to bring it up. But I think until really the bitter end, she doesn't really want to acknowledge that, because there's a way in which it's just too much. Like it's so much trauma, it's so much baggage, and she just wants to say, no, this is my new life. Here's what I'm going to make of myself. Here's the future I'm going to have. And I think, my family had a different experience because we're from Malaysia and not China. So I don't have immediate family members who lived through the Cultural Revolution, but there is a thing that I think is common among, sort of fellow children of immigrants. And that's a sort of, again, not true for everybody, but I think for many of our families, there's this reluctance on the part of, my parents to talk about the past. And their past was like definitely like nowhere near as traumatic as May's, but it's still something that's, I think that they have this sense of like, well, why would you want to talk about that? I think it's also just maybe not culturally, it doesn't really make sense for them to like dwell in the past in this way. And so I think I have felt that like personally in my life, like people who, just really wanted to sort of start new and different lives and didn't see the sense in looking to the past.
Oh, well. I have a bunch more questions. I'm only going to ask a couple more questions. I want to be able to get to some audience questions. So this will give you a moment to think of your really good questions. But yeah, no pressure. But before I do, oh gosh, what do I want to ask? I've got so much written down here. One thing I really like from the first book, Goodbye Vitamin, to Real Americans, from book 1 to 2, said this to you before, and I hope this is complimentary, but to me, it feels like you grew as a writer, like 3 books between these 2 books. I really just think, and that's not to knock the first one at all. I really enjoyed that first book too. And I see they're very different in a lot of ways. But I think there are themes that run through both of them. This is another one of those situations we'd rather hear from you. What
I do
themes
want to
do
hear
you,
from you too.
what themes do you hear or see, but speaking between
Yeah.
your 2 books? How do they talk to each other for you?
Yeah, I think that they're both books about families, and they're both books about how it's really hard to understand the people in your family. So the first book is about a young woman who goes home to spend a year with her father who has Alzheimer's. And yeah, I think I was really interested in this phenomenon that's, I think, true of all parents and children, that, there's a huge swath of your parents' life that you don't know about. And even as a kid, like, there's a whole stretch of your life that you don't know about yourself, right? You can't remember about yourself. And so I'm really interested in those gaps and like what they say about um, who each person is, And so I think Real Americans takes that question and really just like drills down
Totally.
and
Yeah.
incorporates like many more characters, incorporates a longer time frame. But it is about that fundamentally to me. It's like, how can we understand one another given the differences, that we have, and how can we sort of still connect? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're reading off the sheet here. Because yeah, no, I mean, my very much, I think both novels in so many ways are about this desperate desire and also at the same time miserable failure to communicate across generations. If you have an answer for why our parents are always insist on keeping secrets from us, yeah,
I mean, and vice versa.
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's very, very fair. What time is it? Oh, let me move over. I want to ask, I've got one other bookseller question here, and I really thought Gal wrote a really nice question. So I'm going to ask you and then we'll turn it over. But this is from Gal, another one of our booksellers. She says, I'm happy you wrote a book about one thing she sees as a happy and healthy, loving relationship between Nick and Lily, mother and son here. Find that so many books written about Asian American sadness, the result of trauma, and not nearly enough about Asian American joy. Because difficult stories and complicated emotions are very much a reality, there's yet still joy that persists. So Gal's question is, I want to know if you would ever write a book specifically about Asian American joy. And I'm tagging on too, or, how do you see that maybe in Real Americans too?
Yeah, I think this is such a interesting question because I definitely care about that too. Like, Asian American joy really matters. I hope to embody Asian American joy in my living. In the fiction, it's interesting, right? Because I don't know, to have characters that are blissful and joyful would make maybe for a not very interesting book. But I do think that the characters in this book, they all have moments of real connection and real love. And I love what Gao said about Lily and Nick. They do have this really special bond. Even when they misunderstand each other, even when one might be ignoring the other one.
Right.
There's a lot of frustration in this book too, I think, between characters who can't quite understand or connect with each other. But I think ultimately, I'm more interested in hope and more interested in those like moments of connection, even if they're fleeting. I think I think that really matters to me. But yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah.
Again, we've got some great readers here, so we're lucky in that. And there's probably some good readers out there. Questions for Rachel? Sure.
So this is a practical question, and it does get to time. How did you structure your life so that you have the time to write?
I'm going to repeat the
Yeah.
question for the recording. How did you find the time to write?
Or yeah, how did I structure it? Yeah, I think one reason I felt like I wanted to write about time scarcity was because I felt the time scarcity, especially when it came to writing. I have always had these sort of more than full-time jobs. I worked for many years at a food magazine, and then I opened a small business. Both of those things are very time consuming. And so I would try to squeeze the writing in every morning usually, or I mean, not every morning. I would try my best to sort of write during my best hours, which was in the morning. So usually just like an hour here or there in the mornings when I was working at those jobs. Eventually, at the end of 2021, I had to leave my small business because I couldn't finish the book. I needed to have longer stretches of time. I needed to have just those days where you go to bed thinking about the book and then you wake up thinking about the book. I think that's really important, at least for me, for finishing this long thing. So after that, I was able to spend more hours working on the book. I would spend, a few hours every morning working on the book, but also, the rest of my day was often still thinking about the book. If I'm washing dishes, if I'm taking a shower, if I'm like weeding, that's still writing also. So I think even when I was pressed for time, there were ways in which I could still like write without actually writing, just like in my mind. Years ago, actually, I did this interview with the writer Elizabeth Gilbert, who told me, I was telling her about my struggles trying to write while working at this food magazine. And she just said, you just need to cheat on your job. You just need to like give your job. I don't remember the percentage she said, but it was something shocking to me. Like I had been giving my job 110%, and she said, give your job much less. And they won't even know the difference. Just give your job less and save the important part for your own writing, because that's what matters. And that actually really shifted things for me. I thought, oh, yeah, like why am I waiting for permission to write this thing that nobody is ever going to give me permission for? And I cheated on my job. Yeah.
Sorry in advance, Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will do that for everyone here, and I'll personalize it.
Yeah. Back there. I'm sorry. I don't think either of us heard you well enough. Mm. Do you see, do you look at the book as a quote unquote American novel? And if so, or if not, why?
Yes, I do. And I think it's yeah, I mean, I don't think you could get more American than this novel, because it is sort of in conversation with so many American ideas, narratives, myths. There are American people in it. Actually, for a while, I think there was, I say it's a Chinese American family, but I think in the marketing copy it just says American family, because I really wanted to insist, this is just an American family. Like the descriptor is almost beside the point. Like every one of us comes from somewhere. So yeah, I don't know. It's like a weird category, right? And like it gives me the same weird feeling as having a book called Real Americans. But I think for better and worse, like I am an American, this book is American, it's about American things. And I think about American things because here I am. Yeah.
I know we started a little late, so I've got time for maybe one or two more. Jenny, go ahead.
My question is, have you talked to your parents about the missing links? And then did you discover anything that was like, whoa, I did not know that? And then two, I don't know if you would want kids in the future, but if you do, then how would you approach the gaps? Like, how would you talk about the gaps with your future kid? Or if you don't want kids, you can say it.
What do you mean? What do you mean by missing links?
Well, no, earlier in the talk, they talked about, like, sometimes you don't really know. Yeah. Don't talk about the past. Yeah. But, so then, to rephrase the question, have you talked to your parents about the past in terms of Malaysia or their lives in Malaysia? Or were there certain secrets that, like, might have come out? Yeah.
Okay, so the question was, have I talked to my parents about their pasts and do they have secrets? And if I want kids in the future, will I tell them more than my parents have, I guess? I have talked to my parents. I think I could still talk to them more. I think culturally it's just been hard to yeah, to have those conversations because I think that they almost like question, they're just not storytellers, you know, in a way that I think is fine. Like not everyone has to be, obviously. They don't narrativize their lives in a way that I think Americans want to, and I as an American want to and want them to. And so I think part of the project of this book too was like learning to be sort of content with the ways in which we communicate with each other and can't fully meet each other where we want to be met. You know, like my parents want to be with me physically. They want to be in the same room with me, and they don't necessarily want to be talking constantly. Whereas I want to know, yeah, like what happened to you? Like what was everything like? And I've gotten some of those stories because they have met me where I want to be met. And, you know, on the other side of that, I've also physically been with them and done nothing with them as they want from me. But I don't know that, yeah, I'll get like the full stories from them ever. I mean, I think I'm going to keep trying, but I don't know that I ever will necessarily. And they're not, in terms of secrets, I don't know, like they're so like mild that like the fact that they had, you know, romantic interests before each other was like a huge like a scandalous thing for them to tell me. And I was like, of course you did. So there's that. Yeah, I hope to have kids in the future. I don't know if it'll happen, but we'll see. And I think I would love to share with my child or children. But I also, I wonder, yeah, like how, it always seems to me that like parents and children are just sort of missing each other, like trying their best to communicate and not quite getting there. And so maybe I'll really want to tell my children all my stories and they'll be like, like, what are you doing? I don't want to hear this at all. This is too much information. Yeah.
I know we started a little late. I could do one more very quick one. There we go.
Yeah, a question about influences. Not in structure exactly, because this is a structure kind of specific to this book itself. But I don't know, a few books that definitely shaped or helped inform this book were like the Ferrante books, the trilogy. Is it a trilogy? I don't know, the Neapolitan books. It might be four, yeah, four of them. But
There's like spinoffs too.
There's
the whole
spin-offs.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. So Ferrante, Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro. I read sort of halfway through writing this book, and I was so excited because maybe he was doing a similar thing with like gently introducing science. And then Ruth Ozeki's A Tale for the Time Being is a book that I also encountered, I think, a little bit into writing this book and was so excited by because it blended together all these different genres and it was just fully its own thing. And it was, yeah, it was unafraid to get weird. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been
Thank
absolutely
you.
wonderful.
Yeah,
And
thank
thank
you
you
all
guys
for
so much for being here. If I can have just 2 more seconds of your attention, I'm going to escort Rachel up this aisle here, and there's a table up there where she will sit and autograph some
Oh,
books.
can I take a picture? I've been really bad about taking pictures
Oh, totally.
on tour.
Everyone smiled.
But
What
can we, I don't know,
do you want to do?
can we take a selfie in front of the,
Yes. Everyone smile.